Imagine being locked up, awaiting trial, and yet treated as if you are already guilty, living in overcrowded, unsanitary, and dangerous conditions. This is the daily reality for many at the Elgin-Middlesex Detention Centre in London, Ontario, a facility notorious for pushing the limits of human endurance and justice. The Elgin-Middlesex Detention Centre, commonly referred to as EMDC, is classified as a maximum security provincial prison, a designation that carries significant implications for both the infrastructure of the facility and the daily lives of those incarcerated within its walls. Maximum security prisons are designed to house individuals who are considered high risk due to the severity of their alleged offenses, their criminal history, or perceived threat to public safety. Unlike minimum or medium security institutions, which may focus on rehabilitation, work programs, and reintegration, maximum security facilities prioritize strict control, surveillance, and containment to prevent escapes, assaults, or disruptions. At EMDC, this status manifests in a range of structural, operational, and procedural features that influence the daily experience of inmates. Security measures are rigorous and omnipresent. High walls, reinforced doors, secure perimeters, and extensive monitoring systems are standard. Inmates are typically confined to their cells for a large portion of the day, often in individual or double occupancy units, and movement within the facility is strictly regulated. Every action, entering the yard, attending medical appointments, or participating in meals, is closely monitored by correctional officers trained to respond to potential threats immediately. While these measures are theoretically intended to maintain order and safety, in practice, they can contribute to an environment that feels oppressive, particularly for individuals who have not yet been convicted of any crime. A significant aspect of EMDC's maximum security designation is its population mix, which includes not only sentenced individuals serving time for serious offenses but also a large proportion of pretrial detainees. These pretrial inmates are legally presumed innocent until proven guilty, yet they are subject to the same high-security protocols as those convicted of violent crimes. This blending of populations creates unique challenges. Individuals awaiting trial may be exposed to heightened tension, conflict, and a culture of fear that is endemic to maximum security environments. They may witness or experience violence, intimidation, and harassment, all while their legal status technically affords them protection under the principle of presumed innocence. The operational demands of maximum security management at EMDC also extend to staffing, policies, and daily routines. Correctional officers in a maximum security setting must maintain constant vigilance, conducting regular counts, searches, and inspections to ensure compliance with security rules. Inmates are subjected to rigorous procedures during every interaction, from entering common areas to handling personal belongings, which reinforces the strict control that defines the facility's security level. Additionally, EMDC's classification necessitates specific training for staff to handle potentially violent incidents, hostage situations, or riots, situations that are more likely in a high-risk environment than in lower security institutions. This contributes to a tense atmosphere, where both inmates and staff operate under constant alert, and minor conflicts can escalate quickly. Infrastructure at maximum security facilities like EMDC is purpose-built to minimize risk. Cells are constructed to prevent concealment of contraband or weapons, communal areas are tightly controlled, and surveillance cameras cover virtually every corner of the prison. These design choices, while intended to maintain order, have unintended consequences for the mental and emotional well-being of inmates. Confinement in small, controlled spaces, limited social interaction, and restricted freedom of movement can lead to heightened anxiety, stress, and feelings of dehumanization. For pretrial detainees, these conditions can be particularly jarring, as they are experiencing the full intensity of a maximum security environment without having been convicted of a crime. EMDC's maximum security classification also influences the programs and services available to inmates. While some correctional institutions offer educational, vocational, and therapeutic programs to support rehabilitation, opportunities in maximum security facilities are often limited due to safety concerns. Group activities must be carefully monitored, and resources for mental health or substance abuse treatment may be constrained. The high-security environment prioritizes containment over rehabilitation, which can create a cycle where individuals are left with few productive outlets to occupy their time or address underlying behavioral issues. In addition, maximum security status impacts the social dynamics within the prison. Inmates are constantly aware of the potential for conflict, and hierarchies often emerge based on perceived strength, affiliations, or reputation. Navigating these dynamics requires vigilance and strategic behavior, and minor infractions or missteps can have serious consequences. For pretrial detainees, the need to adapt quickly to this environment can be particularly stressful, as they are simultaneously dealing with the anxiety of an unresolved legal case and the pressures of surviving in a highly controlled and potentially dangerous setting. EMDC's role as a maximum security provincial facility reflects broader systemic issues in the Canadian correctional system. The reliance on maximum security measures for a mixed population, including those who are legally presumed innocent, raises questions about proportionality, fairness, and the balance between public safety and human rights. While high-security protocols are necessary to protect both staff and inmates, the day-to-day reality for those confined in EMDC underscores the complex tension between ensuring security and preserving dignity, safety, and mental well-being for all prisoners. One of the most critical issues defining the Elgin-Middlesex Detention Centre is its long-standing problem of overcrowding, a crisis that has shaped nearly every aspect of daily life inside the facility. Although EMDC was originally designed to house a specific number of inmates based on safety standards, staffing capacity, and infrastructure limitations, the actual population frequently exceeds those limits by a significant margin. This constant overcapacity places pressure on every system within the prison, turning what should be a controlled environment into one defined by tension, disorder, and risk. Overcrowding begins with the simple reality of too many inmates and too few beds. Cells built for one person often hold two, sometimes even three, with individuals sleeping on makeshift setups, thin mattresses on the floor, or boats, plastic bed frames designed as temporary solutions during overflow. These cramped conditions eliminate any sense of privacy or personal space. When inmates are forced into such tight quarters, tempers flare quickly, and the smallest disagreements can escalate into verbal or physical conflict. Sharing limited space with strangers, some of whom may be dealing with mental health issues, addiction, or withdrawal, creates a volatile environment where stress levels remain dangerously high. The overcrowding crisis also places tremendous strain on basic resources. Showers, toilets, laundry machines, and common areas are insufficient to meet the needs of an oversized population. Long lines, restricted schedules, and broken facilities become part of the daily routine, increasing frustration and creating opportunities for conflict. Hygiene often suffers, not because inmates choose to neglect it, but because the infrastructure simply cannot accommodate the number of people relying on it. Unsanitary conditions develop quickly when dozens of individuals cycle through limited washroom facilities every day. Mold, plumbing issues, and poor ventilation grow worse when maintenance teams cannot keep up with the heavy demand. Healthcare is another critical area affected by overcrowding. The medical unit at EMDC is tasked with handling injuries, illnesses, mental health concerns, and ongoing treatments for chronic conditions. When the population surpasses capacity, the demand for medical care becomes overwhelming. Inmates may wait days to see a nurse, weeks to see a doctor, and months to access specialized treatment. Overcrowding also contributes directly to the spread of communicable diseases, such as respiratory infections, skin conditions, and flu outbreaks. Close contact, shared airspace, and limited cleaning resources create a near-perfect environment for illnesses to circulate rapidly. Medical staff, already stretched thin, struggle to keep up, resulting in avoidable suffering and preventable complications. Overcrowding further affects staffing, creating a dangerous imbalance between the number of inmates and the number of correctional officers available to supervise them. When officers are responsible for monitoring more inmates than recommended, safety becomes harder to maintain. Staff burnout rises, response times slow, and routine procedures, such as conducting searches, supervising common areas, or escorting inmates to programs, become increasingly difficult. Fatigue and understaffing contribute to a heightened risk of mistakes, miscommunication, or delayed intervention in emergencies. This imbalance not only endangers inmates but also places officers in harm's way, fueling tension and undermining morale within the facility. Programs and services also deteriorate under the weight of overcrowding. Educational opportunities, substance abuse counseling, anger management classes, and spiritual services become limited or impossible to deliver consistently. Rooms designated for programs may be repurposed as temporary housing, and staff assigned to run programming may be redirected to basic security duties. As a result, inmates have fewer productive ways to spend their time, increasing boredom, restlessness, and hopelessness. For pretrial inmates who have not been convicted and are simply waiting for court proceedings, the inability to engage in constructive activities can worsen the psychological burden of incarceration. The overcrowding crisis also undermines rehabilitation, an already challenging goal within a maximum security facility. Without adequate programming, support services, or stable living conditions, inmates struggle to address the underlying issues that contribute to criminal behavior. For those serving short sentences or awaiting court dates, the lack of structure can create an environment where negative behaviors are reinforced rather than corrected. Overcrowded living conditions also increase the influence of prison subcultures, making vulnerable inmates more susceptible to manipulation, recruitment into criminal networks, or exploitation. Mental health is deeply affected by overcrowding as well. In small, noisy, tightly packed spaces, individuals suffering from anxiety, depression, PTSD, or substance withdrawal face constant triggers with few coping mechanisms available. Tension becomes a daily companion. The inability to retreat, rest, or find a quiet moment for reflection intensifies psychological distress. Mental health services, already stretched thin, cannot meet the increased demand. Self-harm incidents, behavioral outbursts, and emotional breakdowns become more common, yet resources to manage them remain limited. Finally, overcrowding at EMDC creates a cycle that is difficult to break. Courts continue sending individuals to the facility, many of them awaiting trial, while systemic issues such as trial backlogs, lack of alternatives to incarceration, and administrative delays slow the release process. As long as the population exceeds the facility's intended capacity, every aspect of EMDC's environment remains under strain. Each additional inmate magnifies the pressure on the system, turning the overcrowding crisis into a persistent, self-reinforcing problem that affects everyone inside the facility. One of the most troubling and persistent issues at the Elgin-Middlesex Detention Centre is the problem of unsanitary living conditions, a problem that amplifies the challenges of incarceration and directly impacts the physical and mental health of inmates. These conditions are not the result of isolated incidents or temporary oversights. Rather, they stem from long-term structural issues, insufficient resources, overcrowding, and the overall strain placed on a facility operating far beyond its intended capacity. As a result, many inmates at EMDC find themselves living in an environment where cleanliness, proper hygiene, and basic sanitation are severely compromised. Unsanitary conditions often begin within the cells themselves, which are frequently overcrowded and poorly maintained. Inmates may share small, confined spaces with one or two additional people, leading to a buildup of odor, moisture, and bacteria. Cleaning supplies, when available at all, are distributed infrequently and in limited quantities, making it difficult for inmates to maintain even a basic level of cleanliness. Floors may remain dirty, walls may be stained or peeling, and ventilation systems often fail to circulate fresh air effectively. With so many individuals confined to such tight spaces for extended periods, the environment quickly becomes stale and unhygienic, contributing to respiratory issues, headaches, and general discomfort. Bathrooms and showers are another major point of concern. In many cases, sanitation facilities at EMDC are insufficient for the number of inmates relying on them. Toilets may clog or overflow, sinks may malfunction, and showers may run with inconsistent temperature or pressure. When maintenance teams are overwhelmed or understaffed, these issues can go unresolved for days or even weeks. The result is unpleasant odors, mold buildup, and surfaces that become breeding grounds for bacteria and infection. Inmates often wait in long lines to use these facilities, and the limited availability of hot water or functioning fixtures means that hygiene quickly deteriorates, especially in overcrowded ranges. Laundry services also suffer under the strain of a population too large for the facility's capacity. Clothes and bedding that should be washed regularly may remain unclean for extended periods simply because laundry machines cannot keep up with demand. Dirty uniforms, sweat-soaked bedding, and unwashed towels contribute to a generally unhygienic environment. In some cases, inmates may attempt to hand-wash their clothing using sinks or small basins, but limited access to soap and clean water makes this difficult and ineffective. The issue of unsanitary conditions extends to insect and pest problems as well. Overcrowded, poorly maintained spaces create ideal environments for pests such as cockroaches, bed bugs, and mice. Reports from various inmates and advocacy groups have highlighted recurring infestations, which can cause bites, skin irritations, contamination of personal items, and a deep sense of discomfort and distress. Pests thrive in conditions where food is consumed in cells due to lack of space, where crumbs accumulate, and where structural gaps or damaged surfaces allow them to hide. Attempts to control pests may be inconsistent or temporary, and without addressing the underlying conditions enabling them, the problem reemerges repeatedly. Trash disposal is another significant challenge in an overburdened facility. Garbage bins may overflow when staff are unable to keep up with waste removal. When trash accumulates in common areas, hallways, or cells, it contributes to foul odors, unsanitary air quality, and the spread of bacteria. Rotten food, spilled liquids, and discarded personal items often sit for too long before being removed, further worsening the hygiene situation. Inmates may feel helpless watching garbage pile up around them, an experience that adds to the mental strain of imprisonment. The problems are not limited to physical cleanliness. Air quality also suffers greatly. Poor ventilation, overcrowding, and limited access to fresh air create a musty, stale environment where airborne bacteria, dust, and unpleasant smells circulate continuously. Inmates with asthma, allergies, or respiratory issues may struggle to breathe comfortably, especially during the summer when temperatures rise and airflow is minimal. The lack of outdoor time exacerbates these issues, as many inmates spend large portions of their day in poorly ventilated indoor areas. Access to hygienic supplies is another persistent issue. Items such as soap, toothpaste, deodorant, shampoo, and disinfectant are often rationed or inconsistently provided. Inmates who cannot afford to purchase hygiene products through the canteen may go without essential items. Inadequate access to these basic necessities undermines personal hygiene and contributes to the spread of illness. Even simple tasks like brushing teeth or washing hands may become difficult when supplies run low or are distributed irregularly. Unsanitary conditions also contribute to the spread of infectious diseases, including skin infections, colds, flu, and gastrointestinal illnesses. In a facility where people live in close quarters and share limited facilities, a single illness can spread quickly. Common infections like staph, ringworm, or scabies may circulate repeatedly when hygiene is poor, and medical treatment may be delayed due to overburdened healthcare staff. These recurring health issues create cycles of sickness that affect entire units within the facility. In addition to the physical health impacts, the psychological effects of living in unsanitary conditions are profound. Constant exposure to filth, foul odors, pests, and deteriorating infrastructure contributes to feelings of hopelessness, frustration, and degradation. Inmates may feel stripped of dignity when forced to live in environments that fail to meet even basic standards of cleanliness. These conditions can heighten anxiety, worsen depression, and intensify the emotional strain already associated with confinement. For pretrial inmates, those who have not been convicted and are awaiting their day in court, the psychological burden of living in such conditions is especially heavy. Safety concerns at the Elgin-Middlesex Detention Centre form one of the most alarming and widely reported aspects of its operation. EMDC has long been associated with violence, instability, and a persistent sense of danger, affecting inmates and staff alike. The combination of overcrowding, understaffing, and inadequate infrastructure creates a setting where maintaining order becomes increasingly difficult and where the risk of physical harm is a constant presence. For many individuals inside the facility, including those awaiting trial and legally presumed innocent, every day involves navigating an environment filled with fear, unpredictability, and tension. One of the major safety concerns within EMDC is inmate-on-inmate violence, which includes physical assaults, fights, intimidation, and extortion. Overcrowding forces individuals into close proximity with people they may not get along with, individuals dealing with mental health challenges, or those with a history of aggressive behavior. In such cramped conditions, even minor disagreements, over food, phone access, hygiene, or personal space, can quickly escalate into physical altercations. Some ranges may be dominated by stronger inmates or groups, creating hierarchies that increase the pressure on more vulnerable individuals who may be bullied, forced into giving up their belongings, or threatened into silence. The lack of safe, supervised spaces and insufficient staff presence only amplifies this threat. Another serious aspect of safety concerns is the frequency of inmate assaults on staff. Correctional officers working in overcrowded ranges are often outnumbered and overworked, making it difficult to intervene in conflicts or maintain control. Tensions in a volatile environment can turn against staff members who are perceived as enforcing unpopular rules or attempting to break up fights. When officers are stretched thin, their ability to respond quickly and effectively decreases, placing both themselves and the inmates in greater danger. This imbalance creates a stressful working environment where officers must remain constantly vigilant, knowing that a single misstep or delayed reaction could lead to injury. Staff shortages significantly contribute to safety problems. When EMDC operates without adequate staffing levels, ranges may go unsupervised for longer periods, increasing the likelihood of conflicts. Essential routines such as inmate checks, searches for contraband, or controlled movement between areas may be delayed or disrupted. Without enough officers to properly monitor each unit, inmates may gain opportunities to smuggle prohibited items, create improvised weapons, or engage in behaviors that escalate tension. These gaps in oversight can lead to incidents that spiral out of control before help arrives. The presence of contraband, including drugs, makeshift weapons, and unauthorized items, is another major issue linked to safety concerns. Overcrowded environments with limited supervision create opportunities for contraband to circulate within the facility. Weapons fashioned from toothbrushes, metal pieces, or broken fixtures pose a serious threat during conflicts. The presence of drugs or illicit substances can fuel unpredictable behavior, overdoses, and violent disputes. Smuggling routes may develop through visitors, corrupt staff, or other inmates, making it difficult to fully eliminate the problem. Each time contraband enters the system, the overall safety of the institution is compromised. Mental health crises also play a major role in safety concerns. A significant portion of EMDC's population deals with mental health issues, trauma, addiction, or psychological instability. Without adequate mental health care, counseling, or crisis intervention, individuals experiencing severe distress may act unpredictably, engage in self-harm, or lash out at others. When staff are not trained or equipped to respond effectively, these situations can escalate into emergencies that endanger both the affected inmate and those nearby. The lack of quiet, therapeutic spaces and the intense stress of the environment further aggravate these issues. Another major factor contributing to unsafe conditions is the deterioration of the facility's physical infrastructure. Broken locks, malfunctioning cameras, damaged cell doors, and blind spots in surveillance make it harder to ensure proper monitoring and control. Areas without functioning cameras can become hotspots for violence or illicit exchanges. When basic security hardware fails, inmates may feel emboldened to engage in risky behavior, knowing that detection and intervention are less likely. The facility's aging design also means that the layout itself may create opportunities for conflict, with narrow hallways, limited sightlines, and confined shared spaces contributing to the danger. Safety concerns at EMDC are also closely tied to delays in emergency response. When fights break out or when an inmate suffers an overdose, a medical crisis, or a mental health emergency, every second counts. However, staffing shortages, locked doors, and limited access routes can delay intervention. In some cases, officers may hesitate to enter a violent situation without backup, increasing the risk of serious harm. Delays in medical attention can have life-threatening consequences, and incidents that might have been manageable with swift response can escalate into tragedies. The atmosphere of constant threat contributes to a broader climate of anxiety, stress, and hypervigilance among inmates. Individuals must remain alert at all times, even when trying to sleep, shower, or eat. New inmates, particularly those with no prior experience in the correctional system, may be overwhelmed by the unpredictable nature of the environment. The constant fear of being attacked, robbed, or manipulated erodes a sense of safety and undermines any possibility of stability. This psychological burden can lead to increased aggression, impulsive behavior, or emotional withdrawal, all of which heighten the risks within the facility. Even everyday activities such as recreation time, meals, or phone calls can become points of conflict due to limited availability and high demand. Situations that would be routine in a well-managed facility become flashpoints for confrontation at EMDC when too many inmates compete for too few resources. The inability to escape stressful situations or de-escalate tensions contributes to a cycle of frustration and violence. The human rights implications at the Elgin-Middlesex Detention Centre represent one of the most serious and ethically troubling aspects of the facility's operations. While prisons by their nature involve restrictions on liberty, they are still obligated to uphold basic human rights, protect dignity, and ensure humane treatment. At EMDC, however, persistent issues such as overcrowding, violence, unsanitary conditions, and inadequate healthcare reveal deep systemic failures that challenge these fundamental principles. For many inmates, particularly those who are awaiting trial and legally presumed innocent, the conditions they endure raise profound questions about fairness, justice, and the integrity of the broader correctional system. At the core of the human rights concerns is the principle of presumption of innocence. Pretrial detainees make up a significant portion of EMDC's population, yet despite not having been convicted, they are subjected to the same conditions as sentenced inmates. This means individuals who have not been found guilty of any crime may experience prolonged confinement in overcrowded cells, exposure to violence, extreme stress, and lack of basic hygiene. Detaining presumed innocent individuals under such punitive conditions contradicts the very foundation of the justice system, which is built on fairness and due process. When people awaiting trial face the harsh realities typically associated with punishment, the lines between justice and violation become blurred. Another major human rights issue concerns the right to humane and adequate living conditions. International human rights standards such as those outlined by the United Nations and various Canadian legal guidelines emphasize that prisoners are entitled to clean facilities, access to proper sanitation, sufficient space, and protection from physical harm. Yet EMDC's chronic overcrowding directly undermines these rights. Inmates are frequently forced into conditions that many advocacy organizations describe as degrading. Being confined to small, cramped cells, sleeping on the floor, sharing limited washroom facilities, and living in unclean environments can be considered a violation of the basic right to dignity. Such conditions not only cause physical discomfort but also contribute to long-term psychological harm. Access to healthcare is another critical area where human rights concerns emerge. The right to timely and adequate medical care applies to all individuals, regardless of incarceration status. However, at EMDC, medical care is often delayed due to understaffing and overwhelming demand. Inmates may wait extended periods for treatment of injuries, chronic illnesses, or mental health crises. Reports have noted instances where individuals with serious health conditions did not receive timely intervention, resulting in preventable complications or worsening symptoms. Inadequate mental health care is especially troubling, as many inmates struggle with trauma, addiction, anxiety, or other psychological challenges. When mental health concerns go unaddressed, vulnerable inmates suffer significantly, and the risk of self-harm or suicide increases. The rising number of inmate deaths at EMDC in recent years has drawn attention from human rights advocates, families, and legal organizations who argue that the facility fails to protect the most fundamental right of all, the right to life. Many of these deaths have been connected to overdoses, violence, medical neglect, or mental health crises, issues that reflect deeper systemic failures. When individuals die in custody due to preventable circumstances, it signals a breakdown in the facility's duty of care, raising serious ethical and legal concerns. Human rights implications also extend to the right to personal safety. Every inmate, regardless of the charges they face, has the right to protection from violence, intimidation, and abuse. Yet many individuals at EMDC report being constantly exposed to threats, bullying, gang influence, and physical altercations. The atmosphere of fear and instability undermines any sense of security and subjects inmates to a daily struggle for survival. Those who are weaker, younger, or new to the environment are particularly vulnerable. The failure to protect inmates from harm, especially in a facility where assaults and conflicts frequently occur, constitutes a significant human rights failure. Furthermore, EMDC's conditions impact other rights, such as the right to maintain family connections. Limited visitation hours, lockdowns, and inconsistent communication access make it difficult for inmates to stay connected with loved ones. For pretrial detainees, maintaining contact with family is crucial for emotional stability and legal preparation. Yet the instability within the facility often disrupts these vital connections. Without regular phone access, visitation opportunities, or supportive communication, inmates experience isolation, which exacerbates stress and mental health struggles. The broader lack of rehabilitation and meaningful programming also raises human rights concerns. While maximum security facilities prioritize security, the complete absence of educational, vocational, or therapeutic programs fails to meet recognized standards for inmate development and well-being. International guidelines emphasize that prisons should provide opportunities for personal growth, education, and skill building, even in restrictive environments. When inmates have no access to such resources and spend long hours idle in their cells, the prison effectively denies them the right to rehabilitation, a key component of modern correctional philosophy. These human rights issues are not merely theoretical concerns. They have real, tangible consequences. Individuals who pass through EMDC often emerge in worse physical and psychological condition than when they entered. The experience of being housed in unsafe, unsanitary, and dehumanizing conditions leaves lasting scars that affect their reintegration into society. For pretrial inmates, the injustice is even more severe, as they may endure this suffering without ever being convicted. The Elgin-Middlesex Detention Centre has become one of the most widely reported and publicly scrutinized correctional facilities in Ontario, largely due to the intense media coverage and persistent efforts of advocacy groups who have brought its issues into the public eye. The spotlight from journalists, human rights organizations, legal experts, and families of inmates has transformed EMDC from a local institutional problem into a provincial symbol of systemic failure. This level of attention has not only highlighted the deep structural issues within the facility but has also generated ongoing debate about the state of the correctional system as a whole. Media coverage plays a central role in shaping public understanding of EMDC. Over the years, news reports have repeatedly documented stories of violence, neglect, overcrowding, and preventable deaths within the facility. These reports often feature interviews with former inmates, correctional officers, legal representatives, and grieving family members, people who have first-hand experienced the consequences of the facility's failures. Journalists have uncovered stories that might otherwise have remained hidden behind the walls of the institution, exposing patterns of neglect and raising important questions about responsibility and accountability. Many of the stories covered by the media revolve around inmate deaths, a topic that has generated significant public concern. Reports detailing the tragic circumstances of overdoses, suicides, untreated medical conditions, or violent incidents inside EMDC have sparked outrage and emotional responses from the community. These cases often prompt calls for government intervention, and in some instances, they lead to inquests and formal investigations. Media coverage ensures that these incidents are not dismissed as isolated events but are instead seen as part of a broader, systemic problem requiring urgent attention. Advocacy groups play an equally important role in bringing issues at EMDC into focus. Organizations advocating for prison justice, human rights, addiction support, and mental health reform have consistently highlighted EMDC as an example of where the correctional system fails to meet basic standards of care. These groups gather testimonies from inmates, families, and former staff, compile data on the facility's issues, and use their platforms to raise awareness about the systemic failures that require meaningful reform. Family members of inmates have become some of the most vocal advocates for change. Many have spoken publicly about their loved ones' experiences, sharing stories of mistreatment, medical neglect, and emotional distress. They often describe feeling powerless, unable to protect someone they care about, yet determined to fight for accountability. Their voices add a deeply human element to the conversation, reminding the public that individuals inside EMDC are not faceless criminals but human beings with families, histories, and rights. These families often work alongside advocacy groups, participate in public demonstrations, or push for legal action to ensure their loved one's suffering is not ignored. Social media has also amplified the conversation. Online platforms allow former inmates, family members, and supporters to share personal stories that might not reach traditional news outlets. Hashtags, awareness campaigns, and viral posts help bring continuous visibility to the conditions inside EMDC. These digital movements create a sense of community among individuals who have been impacted and make it more difficult for authorities to dismiss concerns as exaggerated or isolated. Legal professionals and human rights experts frequently cite EMDC in discussions about the deficiencies of Ontario's correctional system. Public inquiries, academic studies, and policy analyses often reference the facility as an example of how overcrowding, underfunding, and poor oversight contribute to inhumane outcomes. Law firms representing inmates in civil cases or wrongful death actions have also shed light on systemic negligence. Their involvement underscores the legal and ethical implications of the issues reported by the media and raised by advocates. Government officials and policymakers cannot easily ignore the spotlight placed on EMDC. Every time a major incident occurs, a death, a violent outbreak, or a publicized failure of medical care, it triggers renewed calls for inspections, audits, or reforms. Politicians are frequently asked to respond to concerns about EMDC, especially during elections or legislative sessions. While reforms have been promised over the years, the media and advocacy spotlight ensures that public pressure remains constant, preventing these issues from quietly fading away without action. In addition to public pressure, the spotlight has helped draw attention to systemic issues that extend beyond EMDC. The facility is often cited as a symbol of broader provincial challenges, such as delays in the court system, a lack of mental health resources, inadequate funding of detention centers, and the absence of meaningful rehabilitation programs. Media reports frequently link conditions at EMDC to failures across the justice system, emphasizing that the problems cannot be solved through surface-level fixes alone. The sustained attention also influences how society views incarceration itself. Many people may initially assume that inmates deserve harsh treatment or that poor conditions are simply part of punishment. But when the media humanizes the individuals inside EMDC, including those awaiting trial who have not been convicted, the narrative shifts. The spotlight encourages the public to view correctional issues through the lens of human rights, fairness, and responsibility. It challenges stereotypes and invites deeper reflection about what humane incarceration should look like in a modern society. Advocacy efforts additionally help keep the memory of those who have died at EMDC alive. Vigils, marches, memorial events, and public gatherings ensure these individuals are not forgotten. Their names are invoked not only as tragic examples but as powerful symbols fueling the demand for change. The conditions inside the Elgin-Middlesex Detention Centre have triggered one of the most persistent and urgent calls for reform within Ontario's correctional system. EMDC's ongoing challenges, overcrowding, violence, inadequate healthcare, understaffing, and the daily risks faced by both inmates and correctional officers, have pushed advocacy groups, former inmates, families of detainees, legal experts, and even political leaders to confront a difficult truth. The current structure is no longer sustainable. The situation is not simply about improving a single facility, it represents a deeper systemic issue that ripples across the entire provincial jail system. EMDC has essentially become a symbol of what happens when outdated infrastructure, rapid population shifts, and underfunded correctional services collide. Calls for reform begin with the recognition that EMDC was never built to handle the volume and complexity of inmates it manages today. When the facility first opened decades ago, the criminal justice landscape looked very different. The population was smaller, cases moved faster, and mental health-related incarcerations were far less common. Over time, however, a significant portion of individuals entering EMDC have come from vulnerable backgrounds, struggling with mental illness, addiction, homelessness, and poverty. This shift was never matched with increased mental health staffing, therapeutic resources, or rehabilitation programs. As a result, EMDC has become a containment center rather than a correctional institution, housing people in crisis without giving them the tools to stabilize or recover. Reform advocates argue that transforming the facility must start with acknowledging this mismatch between inmate needs and institutional capability. Another major pillar of the reform movement focuses on staffing and safety. Correctional officers at EMDC have repeatedly raised concerns that they are outnumbered, overworked, and placed in dangerous situations due to chronic understaffing and high inmate volatility. Officers have described moments when there are simply not enough personnel to safely intervene in fights, respond to medical emergencies, or conduct proper supervision. Many have called for improved training, more mental health support, and updated protocols that reduce the reliance on lockdowns as a form of control. Families of inmates, meanwhile, argue that better staffing would reduce violence, ensure inmates receive timely medical treatment, and prevent avoidable deaths. The call for reform, therefore, is not one-sided. It is shared by those working behind the bars and those living within them. Infrastructure reform is another key demand. EMDC's physical layout, designed for an era long gone, creates blind spots, bottlenecks, and cramped living spaces that worsen tension. Cells meant for one person now house 2 or sometimes 3 inmates, forcing individuals to sleep on the floor next to a toilet. Ventilation issues contribute to hygiene problems, and outdated security features make it harder to monitor high-risk areas effectively. Advocates argue that modernizing the building, expanding the facility, or even replacing it entirely would dramatically improve daily operations. Some jurisdictions have moved toward campus-style correctional centers, offering separate units for mental health care, rehabilitation, and general population housing. Reform discussions increasingly explore whether a similar model could serve London more effectively. Reforms also extend to the justice system itself. Delays in court proceedings, administrative backlogs, and limited access to legal resources keep many inmates stuck in EMDC far longer than necessary. Since a significant percentage of detainees are awaiting trial, still innocent under the law, advocates argue that speeding up court processes would reduce overcrowding almost immediately. This includes digitalizing court systems, expanding bail supervision programs, and increasing access to legal aid. When inmates spend months or even years waiting for their day in court, the facility becomes clogged with individuals who should not be enduring long-term incarceration at all. Healthcare reform is another major aspect of the conversation. EMDC has seen numerous incidents where inmates struggle to receive timely medical attention, including mental health care. Many of the deaths inside the facility involve delayed medical response or untreated psychological distress. Advocates, therefore, push for a stronger on-site clinical staff, addiction specialists, and crisis intervention teams. Some propose partnerships with hospitals and mental health organizations to create a system where professionals, rather than correctional officers, handle medical crises. This shift could reduce violence, prevent overdoses, and provide more humane treatment for individuals who clearly need more than confinement. Finally, reformers urge a cultural shift within correctional philosophy. Jails like EMDC often focus on containment and punishment, leaving rehabilitation as an afterthought. Yet modern correctional theory increasingly emphasizes that preparing inmates for reintegration reduces recidivism and creates safer communities. Programs such as vocational training, educational classes, counseling, and life skills development could transform EMDC from a chaotic holding center into a place where individuals emerge stronger and more stable than when they entered. Such programs require funding, staffing, and commitment, but reform advocates believe these investments would pay off in the long term, not just for inmates but for society as a whole.